Kurdish was breathing hard by the time he burst through the doors of the large room where the stone priest Throg slept. The old dwarf burst upright in his cot and let loose a stream of profanities at the young ranger even as he slid his feet over the side and stood up to take the report from him. The old priest blinked sleep from his eyes as they scanned the contents of the letter. "Is this right?" he asked, walking over to a brazier and pulling a live coal out of it with his bare hands. The ranger nodded, flinching as he watched the dwarf priest walk over to a nearby torch sconce and lit the oiled rags with the living coal still grasped in his hand. Thrag read the letter again and before absently tossing the coal back into the brazier. "This means that the city is practically on our mining company's doorstep. If this report is true, then we should begin sending advance parties north as quickly as possible while we muster the rest of our troops." The priest turned a bloodshot eye on the young ranger. "Get on back to your post and tell them to send out their best vanguard to secure the region while the rest of us board our ships, and we'll come around the endless sea so as to avoid stepping on any of the manlings' toes by marching through their lands." The ranger hesitated a moment before the older dwarf growled, "Don't make me say it again, lad." The young dwarf spooked, then turned and ran back down the corridor. Thrag's eyes did not leave the paper. If his scholars were correct about the technology of this city, then perhaps this would give King Golok the edge he needed to finally destroy their dark brethren of the Abyss and unite their kingdoms once more. Thrag folded the paper up and placed it on a nearby table as he prepared to dress and begin his daily devotions. There was planning to be done. Brockenock spat to the side as he sat staring at the skinny old hag before him. The ogress was sweeping her hands back and forth, holding a strange device that was made up of a cockatrice foot and some strange rocks with odd-shaped holes bored into them. Off to the side, his second-in-command, Dragoncottom, was fast asleep. They had ridden hard through the night when the seer hag had summoned them, her message saying that something of the Elder Worlds had returned, and with it brought promises of riches. Brockenock was unsure of this, and they had been sitting for hours, waiting for the hag to tell them anything while she waved her little charms in the air. His ogre tribe had grown rich following the hag's directions, and Brockenock was not about to dismiss her inclinations, even if they did strike him as a bit eccentric at times. His own eyelids were beginning to droop by the time she grunted at him and began drawing symbols in the ground. This was her way. She had lost her tongue and most of her lower jaw in her youth during the campaign against some of the fledgling human kingdoms to the south, when a cannonball had clipped her, almost tearing her whole head from her body. After recovering, she had been cursed with terrible visions that caused her to shake violently. Sometimes those visions revealed useful information, such as the best place for the tribes to raid. Brockenock hoped that this was one of those times. The first symbol was that of an arrow pointing due north. He pointed to it. "We go north," he growled. The hag nodded vigorously. The next symbol was a tower surrounded by a bunch of small boxes. This one confused him, so he skipped it and went on to the next one. That was of a crude drawing of what looked like an angel with the sun or something bright behind it. He pointed to it. "Are the Basilians going to be a problem? Are we raiding them?" The hag shook her head. Brockenock grunted. He hadn't thought so. If they were headed north, they were going to be getting close to the ice skin of the city of Chill, not towards the hegemony. "Our enemies will be powerful then?" he asked, and got an answering nod of approval. He pursed his giant lips appreciatively. That was good. If his enemy wasn't going to put up a good fight, then what was the point? He went back to the tower symbol, an idea dawning on him. "It's a fortified position that we'll be attacking." A shrug, and then a nod for a response. He grunted again. "How far are we to go?" he asked. The hag held up 5 fingers and then pointed to the cockatrice claw on her hand. 5 days as the cockatrice runs, eh? He grunted. That was roughly about 2 weeks' hard march. He kicked his Dragoncottom, who snorted himself awake. "Get the lads ready. We're moving north." Brockenock smiled and handed a gold bar to the hag, her payment for her visions. Then he walked outside and mounted his boar-drawn chariot, his smile growing into a vicious grin as the creature pulled his vessel into the morning air and hopefully towards victory or a glorious death. Either one was fine to him. King Frel sat in terror as the demonic imps terrorized him from the table, throwing scraps of food and the occasional piece of silverware at him. The king was forced to endure the pestering because he did not wish to draw any further attention to himself as he sat in the tent of his newly appointed demonic master. 3 days had passed since the demons had stormed into his hall, led by a large, hulking brute of a creature who had called himself Bierelat, and had listed off a reckoning of Frel's sins before his very court, calling him out for his cruelty, how he had beaten his servants and called for oppressive taxes to be levied against his people. He had detailed his sins of lust in particular excruciating detail, and had he not been so terrified he might have blushed. Worst of all were his sins of covetousness and greed, which were the majority of what was listed, and with each one Frel felt his anger and his embarrassment rise. When Bierelat had finished his reading, he had called upon Frel to give compensation for his sins or be dragged down to the lower pits of the abyss, where he would be given over to eternal torment. Frel had sputtered in indignation and ordered his soldiers to kill these intruders, but the token guards he kept by his side were easily cut down by the demon and his ilk, which left only Frel to cower before the hulking form of the red-skinned devil. "Now, will you recant? Will you serve your new abyssal masters? Or will you be dragged to your just end in the fires of the pit?" The demon's face loomed large in Frel's vision. The cowardly king had screamed his acquiescence that he would do whatever the fell creature asked, which had led to the demon and his host laughing insatiably at him, the sound grating against his nerves like glass shards being ground into his bare feet. They had ordered his soldiers assemble, and they had marched north. The sounds of their pounding feet punctuated by the sounds of the drums that kept the pace. Each night when they set up camp, Bierelat would take a handful of his soldiers into a large tent in the center of the camp, and their screams would linger in the air throughout the night. In the morning, those soldiers would emerge in cruelly spiked armor, their frames bulging beneath the wicked plate, and would join the mortal elite of the demonic host that inched slowly north towards the bitter lands and the snow-filled wastes that stretched before them. Frel had no idea where they were going, but he dreaded when he would be summoned into that massive tent, and the sounds of his screams would be heard to echo out across the Bay of Innar. General Valen surveyed the massive host that stretched out along the frozen tundra before him. He counted several organized legions, as well as contingents provided by their frost troll allies along the outskirts, the orderly tents of his professional soldiers giving way to the tribal organization of these bestial creatures that followed him south towards this mystical city. He sighed. His scouts had already reported back that 3 other armies of equal and perhaps even greater size were already marching on the city that was their goal. Valen pulled his cloak closer around his shoulders to ward off the chill in the night air. He had sent out messages to their allies in the fledgling kingdoms to the south, as well as offers of support to the ogre tribes to the east and other forces which they felt they could reliably call upon for aid. This was a dire situation, and Valen knew that as he stood now, he could not hope to claim the city or deny their enemies from plundering it. Yet still he prepared to march. The elf was ancient, even by his race's standards. His bones had long since turned brittle, and he could no longer march to battle as a warrior. He had turned to arcane arts later in his life, and so was able to provide a modicum of support to his troops in that regard. His greatest strength, however, was his ability to guide his soldiers. Standing above the battlefield, he could survey the ebb and flow of combat and send his warriors where they were needed most. It galled him to keep him away from the fighting, but he knew his place. He had several capable officers capable of fighting in his stead, and he would need every one of them in the coming fight. He only hoped that he could accomplish what he had been ordered to do. He shuddered at the alternative. No, he had to win this fight. Darkness and loss was the only alternative, and he had already suffered enough of those to last even his long lifetime, and another like it. No, he would not abandon this world to a fate such as that. Alright guys, so there are your 4 factions from which you can choose to ally your warband and eventually your troops with in this campaign. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, Ben, either on Facebook, email, or come to the shop next weekend on December 22nd and ask me in person. I'll be there from about 7 o'clock on that Saturday night. I know that's the weekend, the Saturday before Christmas, but so if I don't get anybody, I might not be there for too long. But if you email me or get in touch with me saying you're going to be there, I'll wait for you, okay? Please let me know as soon as possible if you plan on participating in the campaign. Even if you're not sure to what extent or if you'll be able to make regular games or anything along those lines, if you think you're going to get 1 game, if that's your goal, if that's all you're going to be able to do, let me know, and we will work to make sure that you get that 1 game in, or however many games you think you want to get in, whatever. It doesn't matter. Remember, this is just for fun, so even if you're only thinking you might get 1 game in for this campaign, let me know so that I can plan on you being part of this, okay? This will help me to plan on missions and what the final battle is going to look like, things of that nature. I've posted the player packet on the Game Pulse Mantic Facebook page. However, I can also email you a copy if you will just get in contact with me. You can email me at refugeesoftheoldworld, spelled like the channel name, at gmail.com. So again, that's refugeesoftheoldworld@gmail.com. Make sure you include the extra E at the end of old and at the end of world on that email address. This packet should clear up how the campaign works, what all is expected of you as a player. Just a little spoiler alert, it's only what you want to contribute, nothing more than that, and how to go about participating in the campaign. Once again, I'm really looking forward to playing this campaign with you. One slight change that we're going to be doing in this campaign is that we are going to be switching our game nights from the second and fourth Saturdays of each month to the first and third. So we will be meeting on the first and third Saturdays of each month starting in January. So that means that the campaign is going to start on January 5th, and it's going to run through all of March. So get your warbands ready, and happy gaming until then, guys. Look for future videos coming from this channel to update you on the campaign progress.